everyone, Nikki here, and I am so close to being done with the Expanse series now, and I am so happy that I stuck it out because book number 8, Tiamat's Wrath, this has been my favorite book yet, and it was just so worth it. It's everything I wanted, everything I needed from the Expanse, and everything that I hoped for, and I know that I'm gonna get kind of excited during this review, and I'll try to bring it down as much as possible because I know I peak out when that happens. But anyway, buckle up your crash couches because you're in for a gushing review. Within the boundary of the city, Laconia was cleaner, newer, brighter, and more controlled than most space stations Holden had been on. Just outside it was wilderness, like he'd only seen in storybooks. Ancient forests and alien ruins that would take generations to tame and explore. Holden had heard gossip and rumors about the remnant technologies brought to shambling life by early work with the protomolecule. Boring worms the size of spacecraft, dog-like repair drones that made no distinction between mechanism and flesh, crystalline caves with piezoelectric effects that induced hallucinations of music and crippling vertigo. Even as the capital city became synonymous with humanity as a whole, this planet around it stayed alien, an island of the profoundly familiar in a sea of we don't understand that yet. In a way, it was reassuring that Duarte, for all his god-emperor reach, couldn't achieve everything in just a few decades. To refresh you on Duarte, he is receiving these protomolecule treatments from Dr. Cortazar to make him immortal because he feels like the only stable ruler is one that can rule forever and ever and ever. And so Duarte is the High Consul of Laconia, and he is basically the emperor of humanity. He's really a dictator. And it's part of his ruling that no one else is allowed to receive the protomolecule treatment that he is receiving. Not even Dr. Cortazar. Cortazar in last book was trying to convince him, but don't you need your doctor with you for all eternity too to make sure that all is going well and you remain immortal? Anyway, as with any dictatorship, there's usually some kind of resistance. And the resistance here is called the Underground. And the Underground is led by Saba. Saba is Drummer's husband. Okay, so key members of the Underground include Bobbie, Alex, and Naomi. So Bobbie and Alex are together on the Gathering Storm, which is like a super updated version of the Roci that they stole from Laconia last book. And Naomi is being transported really undercover, just in these shipping containers that are disguised as carrying soil to different systems. Sadly, the Roci is mothballed on Freehold. And I didn't know that I could actually miss a ship the way that I did, but I really missed the Roci here. And okay, a couple other key Roci crew members who I haven't mentioned yet. Amos is MIA on Laconia, and Holden is imprisoned on Laconia, and he's been there for over a year now. So there's about a year between Persepolis Rising and Tiamat's Wrath. Tiamat's Wrath was published in 2019, and like the previous 7 novels, the title comes from Mesopotamian mythology. And Tiamat is the embodiment of chaos, and her complement Apsu, who represents order, so she's the goddess of salt water, he is the god of fresh water, and you could see in this video here that the salt water is actually what looks more blue and clear, and the fresh water here is more turbid. Anyway, their waters mixed, and from their waters, the next generation of gods were born. So a couple generations later, the gods are starting to annoy Tiamat and Apsu. So whenever they all get together, they're rowdy, they're keeping Tiamat and Apsu up late, so they're losing sleep. So Tiamat kind of swallows her frustration out of love for her children. But Apsu's like, I am going to kill those kids, literally. So he plots to destroy the young gods. So the younger gods get wind of this, and their descendant E, and I'm not too sure on this, like, it's really complex getting into Mesopotamian mythology, but I think E is the god of knowledge and mischief, and I've read in a bunch of places Sweetwater. As a hydrologist, I'm going to interpret that as groundwater, since his name means both earth and water, and possibly magic in there too. From E also comes the symbol for Capricorn, that ram mixed with a fish. What E does is he sets Apsu into an eternal sleep, so effectively killing him. And this is what sends Tiamat over the edge. To avenge her lover, she sets forth an army of monsters, okay, to take out the younger gods. E's son, Marduk, was blessed with the 4 winds when he was born. He is the Babylonian god. He represents Babylon. And he says to the other young gods, like, hey, if I defeat the army, if I defeat Tiamat, let me be ruler of the gods. Okay, so he gets in this epic battle, and Tiamat, it's not clear whether she was a woman or like this dragon-like creature who could sprout multiple heads. But anyway, he gets into this big battle with Tiamat, and eventually he uses his evil winds to trap her. And when she's trapped, he hacks her to pieces, and from her pieces, he builds the land and sky. So unless I'm oversimplifying this, I would say that the architects, so the beings that created the protomolecule, are Tiamat. Then again, based on some of the things that happen in this, you might make the argument that they're Marduk. But anyway, I'm going to say that they're Tiamat. And so Duarte is trying to elevate himself to the status of God King through immortality. And so you might argue then that Duarte is one of the younger gods. And he is poking the bear in this. He is ticking the architects off, or Tiamat. So aptly named Tiamat's Wrath. We get 6 POVs in Tiamat's Wrath. And I'm not going to tell you who the epilogue POV is, because I don't know. I think that kind of ruins things, especially as James S.A. Corey, Ty Frank, and Daniel Abraham are now killing off characters. Yeah. So anyway, I think that they both found, though, their Goldilocks zone with the number of characters. Okay, so six is a good number of POVs. For the prologue POV, we get Holden, and to channel Dickens a little bit, Avasarala was dead to begin with. Ooh, right? And I'm just gonna tell you, like, so that you're not all like worried, like, oh, she was assassinated. She died of supreme old age. And you can see that quote on her gravestone I put together there. I believe that's probably from her husband, or a poem he wrote, or a letter he wrote, something like that. If you know otherwise, let me know in the comments. But anyway, we begin with Avasarala's funeral. Also in attendance are drummer and Avasarala's granddaughter, Kiki. Unfortunately, in this book, because one of the staples throughout has really been that you get Holden's perspective in each book, you don't get that much Holden in Tiamat's Wrath. So he is imprisoned on Laconia, but he's not in a cell. Okay, he's allowed to roam free. I mean, there's cameras all over the place, and he is always under Duarte's eye. And he calls himself Duarte's dancing bear, because he's this dangerous prisoner who's effectively been neutered, because he can't do anything. He can't escape. All eyes are on him at all times. So he gets to roam free. So he has the appearance that he's not dangerous. So we also get the interlude from Holden's perspective, and the interlude is called The Dancing Bear, which is like a different voice that we get for Holden, because usually Holden is not very deep, he's not very introspective, and the dancing bear, he's not very observant. And in the dancing bear chapter, he is all those things. It's like, wow, where did this come from? I like this Holden a lot. I loved the dancing bear interlude. But when I stepped away and I thought about the interlude a little bit, it's like, did Holden just come off like a sociopath there? Is Holden a sociopath? Has he been one the whole time and I just didn't realize it? Or is this some artifact of him having been imprisoned effectively for over a year? So I actually did really enjoy that interlude. The POV with the most chapters, I went through and I counted, is Naomi Nagata. She gets 14 chapters, and I was really surprised when I saw that she had the most chapters, because it didn't feel like she had the most chapters to me in this book, but maybe that's just because they were breezy and enjoyable. I thought all the POVs were enjoyable in this one. I did not find myself dreading any chapters, so that is a first for me, really. I mean, I love both Holden and Miller in Leviathan Wakes, but the characters are written so much better now. They have evolved so much compared to where the books started. So with Naomi's POV, we are a little more in the know of like what's going on throughout the different ring gates, what's going on with the underground, what are their happenings. And the odd thing with Naomi's chapters is, for a lot of them, she has herself in solitary confinement. So she's in that container. She is just still mourning her separation from Holden's separation, because he's on Laconia and she hasn't seen him in over a year. And that's been really hard on her. Some other losses that I won't mention. And so Naomi is just trying to find peace, trying to figure out who she is in all of this. And I thought all the POVs here were well balanced to give you a really good sense of what was going on. The plot fit together really well without a lot of draggy parts, okay? Without a lot of like intricate setup, which I found there was too much of in Persepolis Rising. The next biggest POV is Elvi Okoye. And remember, Elvi is a scientist. She's an either an astrobiologist or an exobiologist, something like that. Okay, so she studies alien biology. So we get 13 chapters from her perspective. And so she's one of the major POVs. And she was one of the major POVs in one of my least favorite Expanse books, Sibylla Byrne. And I just did not like her perspective there, because it was a little pathetic, because she was so focused on just like crushing on Holden. So without that element, she's a lot more palatable. I liked her a lot more in this book. She's of course matured. She's probably in her 60s or 70s now, although everyone looks probably like they're in their 40s or 50s, I would guess. And she is like one of the top researchers for Duarte, for Laconia, for the bad guys, which is just kind of crazy to grapple with, because while you're in her head, you just get like her scientific analysis, and you can tell that she's a good person. We still get Fayez from her perspective to her husband, who loves her very, very, very much and is just like always supportive. But then also, in addition to Elvi's research that she's doing on the architects, Duarte is doing his own little experiment. And his experiment is trying to determine whether or not the architects are sentient. So are they able to change their behavior? So if they weren't sentient, they'd act kind of like a tidal wave. So if you were to put up like some barrier or like try to like blow up a tidal wave, for example, it's going to keep coming at you. Okay, it's not going to be like, ooh, that hurt, and then it's never going to happen again, right? Because it doesn't want that to happen to it. Well, Duarte is trying to figure out, well, are the architects like a tidal wave, or are they thinking beings? Are they reasoning beings? Is there some kind of way that they could reach some sort of negotiation? And so Duarte decides to conduct this experiment where he's going to send a ship through one of the gates, and and the ship is going to exceed that critical mass load where it'll go what they call Dutchman. It'll disappear. And that we don't want to happen. And so to punish the architects, Duarte is like, all right, well, along with this other ship, shortly after it, let's send in another ship that surpasses the critical load with a bomb. We're going to blow it up after it disappears and hopefully hurt the architects. And so the idea was, if they keep doing this and they repeat this experiment, and if the architects eventually change their behavior, okay, then we can learn that they're sentient. Of course, there's lots of issues with that experiment and different analogs for not being fully equivalent for what happened in the past and so forth. But that is what he's trying to do. So when I mentioned earlier, poking the bear, that is it. Okay. And all of that is just so exciting to me. Like, this is what I wanted ages ago from the Expanse. When I love the series so much, and I love the TV series and the book series, but it was really hard for me to be gripped by the books because I really already knew the broad strokes of what was going to happen from watching the TV series. And so here in this book, we've gotten to the point where I don't know what's going to happen. This is beyond the TV series. And this story was really gripping. It wasn't slow, and it explored all these really cool sci-fi elements with the architects, with Duarte, and what he was trying to do to become immortal. One thing that I really liked about Elvi's perspective is that she's a good guy on the wrong side. And that brought to mind this scene from Clerks when Randall is telling Dante that something never sit quite right with him when the Death Star was destroyed in Return of the Jedi because it wasn't fully finished being built yet. There were still independent contractors on board. So like all these innocent people died when it exploded that time. Yeah, so it never sits well with me when we just blow up these ships or stations because we're, as a reader, as the people doing it or whatever, you're so separated from it because it's not like you're jabbing someone with a sword, looking them in the eye. They're far away. It's kind of like stepping on an anthill. And another idea from this book that really got me thinking as well comes from a conversation between Holden and Cortazar. And Holden was talking about how unnatural it is, what they're doing with the pens and the protomolecule and the research on Duarte trying to become immortal. And what Cortazar says is that unnatural is a meaningless term because humans arose inside nature. We're natural. Everything we do is natural. The whole idea that we are different in category is either sentimental or religious, irrelevant from a scientific perspective. So notice that they say from a scientific perspective. This is not a really useful conversation because we tend to look at like what are humans' influences on the natural world, even though we came from nature. We definitely do have these anthropogenic influences, those human-caused influences in like our built environment, in pollution, and so forth. We really do have a big impact. Other animals do have impacts as well that we tend to consider more natural, like a beaver building dams, even though they do influence the flow of a stream, for example. So the next biggest POV is Teresa Duarte. Teresa gets 11 chapters, so her chapters take place on Laconia. She's 14 years old, and I really liked her POV. I was always looking forward to her chapters because you got so much with them. For one, her mentor teacher, his name is Illick. He's a piece of work, but he's a great character, actually. He's really well done. And from Illick, you get to know a little bit more about Duarte's philosophies and like his teachings of Teresa. And Illick is like not only like her mentor and teacher, he also tries to make sure that she socializes with her peers, that she eats her meals, that she gets to where she needs to be. So effectively, Illick is Teresa's mother figure without being warm or loving or any of those things. And from Teresa, you also get interactions with Duarte, and you get to see him in a much softer light because he does love his daughter. And he decides that all right, so what if something happens to him? What if Duarte does die? Like, what if there's an accident? And he's like, oh, if something happens to me 300 years from now, I would like my daughter to take over the reign. So he decides to let Teresa in on the protomolecule treatment so that she can become immortal too, so that he has an immortal heir just in case. And so Duarte is starting to take Teresa under his wing. And she's really intelligent, she's really observant, and she's quite lonely. So she's constantly walking around the Capitol grounds with her dog Muskrat, just exploring and thinking. And somehow these chapters are done really well, even though she doesn't have like someone she's constantly talking to. She just moves through everything, and you get all these pieces, these little puzzle pieces, these little breadcrumbs that you get to put together later. You also get Holden from her perspective. You get to see Holden more as like someone who's not trustworthy maybe, or scary in her eyes. And you also get her only friend in the universe, Timothy, in these chapters. And if you've read the novellas, you might know who Timothy is, but if you haven't and you don't know who Timothy is, I haven't ruined a thing for you yet. And I love that James S.A. Corey rewards you for reading the novellas, because there's stuff that comes back around that you got from them. Like, you get a cameo in one of the Teresa chapters from Santiago Singh's daughter. We first met Singh in Strange Dogs as a child, and then we got to see him, we got his POV in Persepolis Rising. We also get some other cameos from Strange Dogs that include a couple other characters, some creatures, some tech. So I'm not going to say anything else about that, though. I'm going to lump our last couple of POVs together, and that would be Bobbie and Alex. So combined, they have 12 chapters. But the reason that they kind of count as a single POV is because their storyline is very much entwined. And so you get what is going on in Soul System from their perspective. And they're both traveling incognito with secret identities. And one of the themes in this book is really surveillance through all these books. And one of the best examples is when Alex is watching the entertainment feeds, and he wants to watch some of his favorite movies or series or whatever, and he starts to worry, like, if I start to watch what I really like and what Alex Kamal would watch, am I going to be ID'd as Alex if I start to watch things that look like Alex would watch? Because they're trying to be under the radar here, since they're part of the underground. And I've always loved Alex's chapters. No different here. He's not very different. He does not change very much. Like, his son Kit is now an adult and about to get married, and Alex is thinking like, oh, maybe I should be more present in his life. And this is kind of always how Alex is thinking, and we know how what kind of conclusion Alex always comes to. And then also Bobbie has become one of my favorite characters, and in this book she was very reflective. Like, she had been getting more reflective with age, but it was just very much so in this book. So I always found her perspective entertaining as well. Missing from this book was Betsy, and I'm trying to remember now, was her armor destroyed last book? Because she had Laconian armor here, Laconian armor that was painted. So no Betsy, unfortunately. So not only are you getting like what's going on in Soul System, they also come up with a plan to injure the Laconian fleet. And will it work? Lastly, let's get into my ratings. And this was a book that I could not put down. And it's been a while since I got into something that much where I was just like really looking forward to getting into it and finding out what happened and just sticking with these characters and their journey. So story, I'm gonna rate a 9.5 out of 10. Tiamat's Wrath is fantastic from beginning to end. There are no slow parts. Everything came together. And actually, my jaw really did drop twice during this book. And I got really emotional at a certain point, like a few points, like James S.A. Corey, Ty Frank, Daniel Abraham, they tugged at my heartstrings. And I know in part because like we're starting to say our goodbye to the series, and I'm very much invested in these characters now, even in the ship, the Rosie itself. And I had a big emotional response to this book. I got really, really into it. And it had high highs, low lows, a couple of plot twists. I did see some of them coming because there were breadcrumbs left. But it's also satisfying when you see those breadcrumbs and follow them to their logical conclusions. So the reason that I did knock off half a point, and this is just, it's because of something I wanted as a reader that I didn't get, and I kind of have no right to ask for it, but I want it anyway. There was something that happened. There was this big event that happened in the slow zone, where all the ring gates are. And the thing that happened was abrupt, very abrupt. And I know that it happened. I know that it really did. But I just wanted, what I needed was a check-in with Drummer. That's all. Not even from her perspective. I just wanted to see her. So, I don't know. But anyway, I wanted that. Characters, I rated a 9.5 out of 10. And the characters were fantastic this time. They had depth. They were more reflective. They were more introspective. I feel like they grew. Even the youngest character, Teresa, I had a lot of fun reading her chapters, and seeing the world through her eyes was quite interesting for me. The reason I knocked off half a point, and once again, this is a little silly, I knocked off half a point for Fayez, because Fayez, I know some people don't change. He really did not change at all since book 4. He just felt really flat to me, and he was more just like an accessory for Elvi. Like, he's so supportive of her, but it felt like he's like almost not a person. She does think about him on occasion, and I know her research is the most important thing to her, but I don't know. I wanted Fayez to be a little more fleshed out. Prose, I rated a 9.5 out of 10. And the prose here was the best yet. But the thing is, I left half a point off for room for growth, because I think that James S.A. Corey can do even better. Okay. And I'd love to see that in the final book. So I also love how in their prose, they try to incorporate math and science in their descriptions. So for example, she stepped under what looked like an overhanging shelf of sandstone and into the cave. The natural stone gave way almost immediately to the soft glow of the cavern. Stalactites hung from the ceiling like bright icicles, and the walls were built with swirls and shapes in them like a seashell and a Euclidean proof had joined together and become an architect. It's like, I really liked that. As a geologist and throwing in the Euclidean proof, I did enjoy that quite a bit. And also, even like something that's a pretty kind of common description, like this example here. She closed her eyes and turned her face toward the sun. The light and heat felt good on her skin. The brightness pressed through her eyelids, turning everything red. So if I stop there, it's like, yeah, okay, but it's this last sentence right here. Nuclear fusion filtered through blood. Because nuclear fusion you get from the sun. But anyway, I thought that was a great way to tie it all together and make it unique. So with uniqueness comes originality. And, at this point, like, Ty Frank and Daniel Abraham have built this whole world that is unique to them, and they just keep building on it. And this story, like, I didn't see a lot coming that came, and it does feel highly original to me. Like, I don't read a lot of sci-fi, so maybe it's not, but I'm gonna say 10 out of 10 for originality. And for world building, the same, 10 out of 10. Like, really at this point, it's world extending because they're just building on what's already there. But I do feel like I know this world quite well now, and we're exploring all these different places that some of them we get in the novellas and then they come back into the books. And so it's just really taking shape, and it's crazy now how like really nothing has gone on Earth in quite some time. It's like really just like not so important. Like the big player is Laconia, and it's just so strange now that all of a sudden we're pretty much moving out of Sol System. There's still some stuff that happens there, but like the world has expanded, right? That was the whole point of the series, the Expanse. Civilization has expanded. And then that means overall, this is my highest score yet. Tiamat's Wrath gets a 9.7 out of 10. And I am just so excited to get into Leviathan Falls. I finished reading Tiamat's Wrath a couple days ago, but I really wanted to put my ideas down and think about it and do this review before I started reading Leviathan Falls. I mean, I cheated and I read the prologue, but I didn't want this to influence me. So I am so excited to finally get into Leviathan Falls, and depending, you might get a review of this very, very soon. If it's anything like Tiamat's Wrath. I'm also going to review Sins of Our Fathers, so I am almost done. It's been quite a journey. So to keep up with our notifications on iWizard, please subscribe and ring that little bell, and I'll see you next time. Bye.